Stephanie Hubach has been the director of the Mission to North America Special Needs Ministry since 2007. Some of you know her book, Same Lake, Different Boat, coming alongside people touched by disability. And she's also the director of a Christian education DVD that has the same title. She's been published in By Faith magazine and Covenant magazine, Focus on the Family magazine, Breakpoint magazine, etc., etc. And she is a frequent speaker at faith and disability conferences. She's also the mother of an adult son who has a disability. We look forward to hearing what you share, Stephanie.
Jolene, how did you do this? There we go. Okay, super. A welcoming church. Is that on? No. Welcome to Disability Ministry. Okay. A welcoming church is a hospitable church. What does that mean? What's it mean to be a hospitable church? When we think about hospitality in the context of our culture, I think we have a tendency to think about the idea of entertaining, and entertaining involves a checklist, right? Fine china, check. Fine wines, check. Gourmet foods, check. And so when we think about the idea of hospitality as it relates to families affected by disability attending our local congregation, our minds just naturally drift towards the same thing. We drift towards the checklist. Ramp, check. Sensory room, check. Buddy system, check. And yet the concept of biblical hospitality is so much richer than that. In fact, the word hospitality actually means the love of a stranger. And so a hospitable church is a church where the love of a stranger takes place. Now, think about the idea of a hospital. When we think of a hospital is a place where a stranger should be able to go and have their needs met. Now, do you want a hospital to have the right equipment? Absolutely. But is the equipment or the checklist alone enough? In the same way, for a local congregation, for a congregation that's hospitable, it's going to mean that not only do they do the right things, but they also possess the right identity. The Puritan preacher Richard Sibbes once said, "The Church of Christ is a common hospital wherein all are in some measure sick of some spiritual disease or another." So when a church identifies herself as a hospital for sinners, she'll know who she is and why she is here. When she's a hospital for sinners, she'll recognize that, first of all, she has access to the greatest care possible because the great physician is on duty 24 hours a day. She'll also not be surprised by difficulty or disease or disability because she'll recognize that she's here to serve the needs of those who come. She'll accept that disability itself is simply a more noticeable form of the brokenness and difficulty that's common to the human experience. That disability is a normal part of life in an abnormal world. And while the disability itself may not be celebratory, the person always is. She'll recognize that every person in her care is both a lifelong patient, hence the bracelet, and also serves a role as the great physician's assistant in some different varying types of capacities. As a hospital for sinners, she'll recognize why she is here and who she is. And out of that identity comes action. Out of that identity, she'll figure out what to do. Now I ask you, for your congregation, would your congregation self-identify as a hospital for sinners? Or in all honesty, is it more likely that it's a country club for members only? In Jesus' day, the country club for members only folks were the Pharisees. They were the ones in the religious community that created the exclusive environments. Oh, they tried to do the right things. They had the checklist, they checked it off, but they didn't operate from the right identity. In Matthew 24:24, Jesus said, "Woe to you, teachers of the law, you hypocrites, you Pharisees, you tithe the tenth of your mint and dill and cumin, and yet you neglect the greater matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former." Now, if you think like a Pharisee, and I do sometimes, you start thinking, oh, nuts. I left the justice, mercy, and faithfulness off the checklist. But that's really not the takeaway here. The takeaway is, why do you do what you do? The Pharisees were driven by the question, what must I do? And the question itself actually reveals their identity, and it's an identity of self-righteousness. Jesus is trying to steer us towards a different question, and he's trying to steer us to find our identity in him and in his righteousness. Justice, mercy, faithfulness are the very righteous characteristics of God himself. So when we're a hospital for sinners and we're a church that operates from that identity, that our identity is in the righteousness of Christ, we intrinsically understand that the question is not, what must I do? It's, how can I love as I have been loved? In justice, in mercy, in faithfulness. In justice, Jesus freeing me from the oppression of sin. In mercy, Jesus' voluntary engagement into my suffering. In faithfulness, Jesus' voluntary and engaged and sustained commitment to me in this lifetime and the next. When we operate as a hospital for sinners, we know who we are and why we're here. A welcoming church is a hospitable church, a church whose identity is found in the righteousness of Christ, and as such, she'll identify herself as a hospital for sinners. It's a place where a stranger can come and have their needs met. It's a place where everyone is a patient and everyone is a great physician's assistant. Identity drives action, and the actions reflect the character of the great physician in justice, mercy, and faithfulness. And most of all, she will love others as she herself has been loved. Wouldn't you like to go there? It sounds pretty welcoming to me.